What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you an overview of the Arcanist class as well as its archetypes in the upcoming Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, which is currently in beta. So I do plan on covering all of the classes as well as their archetypes throughout this series, so if you have any suggestions or things like that, feel free to drop them below. Now, just right off the bat, what is an Arcanist by itself? So the Arcanist is essentially like a wizard, but who focuses on exploiting magical talents and things like that, as opposed to the pursuit of the knowledge, so to speak, which is why one of their primary features is called Arcanist exploits, but we'll get to that in just a second. Now, at a base, an Arcanist is going to have, for class skills, Knowledge Arcana, Knowledge World, Lore Religion, Lore Nature, as well as Use Magic Device. Now, for our Arcanist Proficiencies, we are going to be proficient with all simple weapons. However, we will not be proficient with any armor or shields. The reason for this being simply because armor comes with a chance to fail magical spells, especially ones that require components. This is a class that you would typically wear robes with as opposed to any type of armor. We will also get access to cantrips, which are 0-level spells you can cast for free, as opposed to your normal spells, which will be limited by your spell slots. Now, one of the other key Arcanist features is that they get access to what is called an arcane reservoir. This is an innate pool of magical energy, they like to call it, which essentially will let you, use points from this pool to increase the caster level of their spells, or as a way to increase the DC of the spell checks, that is the saves that creatures would have to pass to save themselves from the spell in various ways. In addition, later on, it is actually used to fuel quite a few of the different arcane exploits and things like that we'll get into in just a minute. We will also be given the ability to consume spells. This basically makes it to where you can consume a spell slot instead of using it to cast a spell, and this will actually regain points to your arcane reservoir. Now, as far as the level up sheet here goes that you can see, it's relatively simple. Every few levels we're going to be getting arcane exploits as well as learning new spells, which isn't mentioned here but is a given. And that's most of it. It mostly plays like a wizard would, however with the flavor of the Arcanist exploits, as well as the arcane reservoir. Now that said, usually around level 11, an Arcanist will be able to pick up greater exploits, which are just improved versions of regular exploits. And then at 20th level, every Arcanist as well as their archetypes will gain some sort of supremacy over their thing. So for the case of magical supremacy, which also covers a couple of the archetypes, you'll learn to convert your arcane reservoir into spells and back again. So basically you'll be able to expend your arcane reservoir to cast spells that you know, as opposed to having to consume spell slots and things like that. You'll be able to just pass back and forth between your arcane reservoir as well as your spells. Now that brings us to the first archetype for Arcanist, Brown Fur Transmuter. So real quick, it is worth noting that most classes are planned to have at least 6 archetypes to go with them. However, this one only has 4. So I can only guess that they are probably going to add some more at some point. But again, this is a beta, so that is to be expected to some degree. Now, the main hook of the Brown Fur Transmuter is that you trade off some arcane exploits that you would normally learn, and instead you pick up the Powerful Change ability. So at 3rd level, this is going to let you use your arcane reservoir to bolster your transmutation abilities. And then at 9th level, the transmuter will be able to target other people with her transmutation spells, which essentially lets you change the range from personal to touch range. And then their level 20 Supremacy talent is Transmutation Supremacy. So basically this lets you cast your transmutation spells as if they were affected by the Extend spell feat, which is like meta magic, as well as increases the bonus from Powerful Change abilities. So that brings us to our second archetype, the Eldritch Font. So the big thing with the Eldritch Font is that they gain the Font of Power ability or feat or whatever you want to call it. And basically this will let you get extra spell slots per Arcanist spell levels. However, the number of spells you can prepare reduces by 1. So it'll never let this take it to 0, but essentially you'll be able to cast less spells overall, but you'll be able to cast those spells more often. Now at 3rd level, they're going to pick up Eldritch Surge, which lets her increase the DC of a spell or add more caster levels to it. However, this will fatigue you, and if you're already fatigued, it'll become exhausted. And then at 7th level, they pick up Improved Surge, in which case the Eldritch Font will be able to use the Surge ability to make 2 attack rolls associated with the spell, and then take the better result, which just makes you more likely to hit with a spell that requires like a ranged attack or something like that. And then at 13th level, we get Greater Surge. This will let you force a creature to re-roll its savings throw against whatever spell you just cast, and force it to take the lower value. And then lastly, we pick up Bottomless Well. So at 20th level, the Eldritch Font archetype will be able to spend a full round action to refuel themselves, which basically lets them prepare new spells, as well as regain a ton of their arcane reservoir. Now that brings us to the Unlettered Arcanist. Now this is actually a pretty big archetype as far as this goes, because what this essentially does is changes the Arcanist spell list from Wizard and Sorcerer to the Witch spell list, which is going to dramatically change, at least in some cases, the spells you have access to. Because the Arcanist, for the most part, uses the Wizard and Sorcerer spell list for their spellbook. In addition to that, the Unlettered Arcanist also gets a familiar which replaces their traditional spellbook. So if you're unaware, witches actually use their familiar as the store space for their spell slots and things. So basically, your familiar is what is channeling the spells through you, and it works the same way for the Unlettered Arcanist here. Which means you'll get to pick up a familiar, which have a ton of tiny bonuses, which are mostly like skill boosts. And that brings us to White Mage. So White Mage is probably the simplest of some of these archetypes. So basically this will let you use your arcane reservoir to cast cure spells. Cure spells from the cleric spell list as if you knew the spell. However, it does require the spell to be a level that you can cast. And then at 10th level, the second part of the White Mage ability will actually let you expend up to 5 points of your arcane reservoir, and at least 1 5th level spell slot to cast Breath of Life. Breath of Life being a spell that returns characters from the dead. And then their Supremacy talent is actually the same magical Supremacy talent that a couple of the other archetypes get. So, pretty cool class. It's basically Wizard with some flavor, in my opinion. So you get these arcane exploits and your arcane reservoir that you kind of let you bounce between, empowering your spells with your reservoir and then consuming spell slots to bring points back to your reservoir. So basically it just kind of lets you play around with the mechanic of spell slots a little more, and some of the archetypes will just flat out let you change the spell list that you get access to, which personally I think is really cool. Again, just a flavorful choice of Wizard in my personal opinion. There you go, guys. There is a look at the Arcanist as well as the associated archetypes and the mechanics that they will be using in Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. If you would like to support the creation of upcoming content, I would urge you to check out my merch store where you can get some physical merchandise and show your support for the channel. But regardless, truly thank you guys for watching. I'm really enjoying making these videos for you. So with that out of the way, may you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.